Okay, let's talk about hyperbole. A lot of people read this and want to say hyperbole. It's hyperbole is how you pronounce this, hyperbole. Hyperbole is an extreme exaggeration. Here are some examples. I literally died when my mom tried to add me on Snapchat. For some reason, when I read that sentence, that is the shape my voice took. I couldn't even help it. So, why is this an exaggeration? Well, obviously this person didn't die because they are still living and talking about what happened to them. I told you 1,000,000 times to stay out of my room. Probably didn't say it 1,000,000 times. That's an extreme exaggeration. I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Yeah, you might be really, really hungry, but if I put a horse in front of you, you probably would not eat it. I should hope not. So, how do we analyze these? These are the questions we're going to answer. First, what specifically is being exaggerated, and why does that need to be emphasized through this type of exaggeration? Okay, let's go with this first one. What is exaggerated? Basically, what is exaggerated here is this person's humiliation. So they are obviously super embarrassed that their mom tried to add them on Snapchat. Or maybe they're terrified because, that could be scary too. So that is what's being exaggerated, okay? So sometimes the words aren't going to be spelled out within the hyperbole. You have to kind of think about it and dig a little bit to figure out what specifically is being exaggerated. Now, why would this person exaggerate that humiliation? Well, because it is perhaps one of the more embarrassing things that they've experienced, okay? I told you 1,000,000 times to stay out of my room. What's being exaggerated? The amount of times that they said this. Why does that need to be exaggerated for emphasis? Because they really don't want you in their room, obviously. Okay, it's that important that they would say that they said it 1,000,000 times. Okay, or if you're super, super hungry, maybe you're hangry. That's being emphasized because you want it to be fixed right away. You want food now, which is usually when I want food. All right, so let's look at an example that I found in my independent reading. So again, this is when I was reading The Wheel on the School, which I put in parentheses behind it because I had more than one book up here. So I want to signify which book that quote came from. So I would hope you would do the same if you have more than one. And so let's go down to hyperbole. These modern day school kids, they know everything, don't they? Me, all I know is fish. So this book is all about a little fishing village, and so there's a lot of fishermen in it, and this was one of the children's fathers that was speaking, so this is his quote. And because he's a fisherman, he is claiming that the school kids know everything and all he knows is fish. Obviously, that's not true. So let's analyze this. What's being exaggerated? Okay, the simplicity of the man's knowledge is being exaggerated. He states that he only knows facts about fishing, which obviously can't be true. A human being could not function if they only knew things about fish. Okay? They wouldn't be able to take care of themselves otherwise. And even if you're an expert in a specific field, you still know things about other things. You know things about things you aren't even interested in, okay? Because you live in the world, right? So our follow-up question, why does that need to be emphasized through exaggeration? So why is he downplaying his own knowledge here? Okay. He is downplaying his own knowledge in in order to emphasize that the school children know so much. He is trying to make them feel knowledgeable and important. And he's doing it in a funny way. Okay, so let's reread it to make sure it makes sense. The simplicity of the man's knowledge is being exaggerated. He states that he only knows facts about fishing, which obviously can't be true. He's downplaying his own knowledge in order to emphasize that the school children know so much. He's trying to make them feel knowledgeable and important in a funny way. Okay, so how could I expand this to the rest of the story? Because I've read this whole book at this point, so I have a greater context knowledge. So this is where you would communicate to me how this exaggeration plays into the rest of the story. Well, I've read this whole book, and the way that De Jong, which is the author, writes about children, I'm going to word this differently. I already don't like the way I was wording that. I'm going to say De Jong writes about children in a way that they are authorities. He celebrates their curiosity and what they learn throughout the book. I'll say the story. This fisherman echoes this sentiment by poking fun at the students in a way that acknowledges that they know a lot and encourages them to continue learning. I'm not the world's best speller, but Google is. There we go. So De Jong writes about children in a way that they are authorities. In a way that, I'm going to say, portrays them. I like the word portrays because it's like, it's a much more intelligent way of saying shows. I think the word shows gets used too often. So it portrays them as authorities. He celebrates their curiosity and what they learn throughout the story. This fisherman echoes this sentiment by poking fun at the students in a way that acknowledges that they know a lot and encourages them to continue learning. I'm going to say, after all, their curiosity and thirst for knowledge is the entire reason they are devoted to getting storks to nest in Shora. Now, I did talk briefly in the last video especially about the context of this book, and so but you haven't read this book, so a lot of this might not make complete sense to you, and that's okay. So I want you to be as thorough as possible when you are completing this, but don't worry too much about telling me a lot of background information. The most important thing is that it's very clear to me that you can see a connection between the story that you are reading, if I've read it or not, and whatever quote you are analyzing. So that's hyperbole, a definition, some examples, and how to analyze.